Stand somewhere quiet right now and say your own name out loud. Just say it once. What you just heard is your voice. Familiar, yours. The voice you have been listening to for as long as you have been alive. Now imagine somebody had recorded that and played it back to you 10 seconds later. You would hear something else, something thinner, higher, somehow less authoritative. You would probably wince a little. Almost everyone does. That second voice, the one you can't stand and don't quite recognize, is the voice that everyone else who has ever known you has known you by. Your mother, your best friend, the person sitting across from you the last time you said something that mattered. They have all been listening to that voice. You have never heard it. And there is a specific, weirdly beautiful reason for this. It involves two different paths inside your skull, a confrontation that did not exist before 1877, and the strange fact that for almost the entire history of humankind, no person had ever heard their own voice.
Chapter 1. 2 voices in your skull. Sound is just vibration. When you speak, your vocal cords vibrate, your tongue and palate shape the vibration into recognizable sounds, and the result leaves your mouth and travels outward into the room. Most of that sound goes out, away from you, where other people's ears collect it. But not all of it. A meaningful portion of every word you say does not leave your head at all. It travels backward through the bones of your skull, through your jaw, your teeth, your cheekbones, and the small bones around your ears, and arrives at the cochlea, the spiral organ in your inner ear, by going around the air entirely. This is called bone conduction. Bone conduction is unusually good at carrying low frequencies. When you hear yourself talk, what you are actually hearing is 2 voices arriving at your inner ear almost simultaneously. An air-conducted voice that traveled out of your mouth and back in through your ears, and a bone-conducted voice that traveled through the architecture of your face. Your brain combines them into a single experience and calls it my voice.
The bone-conducted voice is lower, warmer, more resonant. It picks up the deep frequencies of the cavity inside your skull. It is, in a real and measurable sense, a richer voice than the one that ever leaves your mouth. That richer voice is the one you have been listening to your entire life. It is the one you imagine you sound like. A microphone has no skull. A microphone hears only the air-conducted voice, the thinner, higher, lighter version, which means the moment a recording is played back, you hear yourself for the first time the way the universe outside your body has always heard you. It always sounds wrong, because it is, technically, missing half of what you have been hearing. Chapter 2. The Voice Confrontation Effect. The discomfort is not just from unfamiliarity. There is a name for it. In 1966, 2 psychologists named Philip Holtzman and Clyde Rousey published a paper called The Voice as a Percept. They played people recordings of their own voices and recordings of strangers and asked them to rate each one. People consistently rated their own recorded voice as less attractive, less competent, less like them than strangers rated the same recording. Even people who knew exactly what was happening, even people who had made peace with the bone conduction explanation, still flinched when they heard themselves played back. Holtzman and Rousey argued that the aversion isn't acoustic, it's existential. Hearing your recorded voice forces you to confront something most people quietly avoid: the gap between how you experience yourself and how the world experiences you. You have a self-image, a sense of how you sound, how confident you come across, how warm or articulate. That image was built in large part on the bone-conducted voice you have been listening to your whole life. A recording is a tiny, brutal data point that says this is what other people have actually been hearing. It is not a coincidence that Beethoven, going deaf in his 30s, learned to bite down on a stick attached to his piano so the vibrations could travel up his teeth and into his skull, a bone conduction hearing aid invented out of desperation. Helen Keller, who was both blind and deaf, learned to hear people speak by placing her hand on the speaker's throat and reading the conduction directly with her fingertips. These are not gimmicks. They are reminders that what you call your voice is just one of two paths the same sound is taking inside your head. Take the louder, lower path away, and you are left with a stranger.
Chapter 3: The First Generation to Know. Here is the part of this story that almost nobody knows. For almost all of human history, no human being ever heard their own voice. Think about this for a second. Your distant ancestors, every grandmother and grandfather and great uncle and great aunt, going back almost to the beginning of language, lived their entire lives without knowing what they sounded like. A man could give orders on a battlefield for 40 years and never know whether his voice carried the authority he imagined. A mother could sing a lullaby to her child every night for a decade and never once hear the song the child heard. A poet could recite his work in a tavern to drunken applause and die never knowing whether his voice was the deep instrument he believed it was or something thin and reedy he would have hated. Then, in 1877, a man named Thomas Edison built a small wax cylinder that could record and play back sound. And within a few decades, the entire species had access to something no human in history had ever had access to: their own voice, played back from outside their body.
It was a small, silent revolution that changed the relationship every human being has with themselves. Almost every story we have of a person hearing their own voice for the first time on Edison's invention contains the same arc: surprise, then disappointment, then sometimes a kind of grief. They didn't sound the way they thought. They sounded smaller, higher, less like the person they had imagined themselves to be. Which means we are the first generation in the history of our species who get to know what we actually sound like to other people. It also means there is a strange, gentle truth on the other side of the discomfort. The voice you cannot stand on your phone, the thinner, higher version that doesn't match the one in your head, is the voice every person who has ever loved you has known by heart. It is the voice your mother memorized when you were 2. It is the voice your best friend can recognize through a closed door. It is the voice somebody is going to remember decades from now, in a moment when you are not in the room.
You will never get to know it the way they do, but it has been the sound of you to them from the very beginning. If you have ever played back a video of yourself and felt that small flinch, that, wait, that's me? Drop it below. I want to know how old you were the first time you heard your own voice from outside your own head.